Welcome, friends. A lot has happened since the last chapter was written in the Ranger Chronicles. Preparations to secure the Hidden Lake Animal Sanctuary and its surroundings against an ecological disaster are well underway. The compound itself has undergone a massive transformation, as I found it necessary to develop new technologies to combat the impending shift to Arctic conditions that all signs have been pointing to for the last few weeks. My animal companions seem to sense this impending doom, as we are experiencing a bit of a population explosion, primordial instinct impelling them to reproduce in massive numbers before the weather turns. I've taken in as many as I can, but there are many more younglings outside these sheltering walls that I haven't been able to locate as of yet. And I may not be able to save them, because according to my calculations, time is about to run out. Within a few days, perhaps hours, the temperature in this area will inexorably fall to sub-zero levels, rendering the area almost uninhabitable for most of the native wildlife. As I said, I developed new technologies, and it's true, but as it turns out, the best hope for this little piece of heaven to evade the icy grip of eternal winter lies not in innovation, but in new applications for tried and true sciences that I had very nearly forgotten about, locked in my memories of another time and another place. Let me explain. My first step was to fabricate and install a fortified wall around the entire area, made of transparent aluminum. Of course, creating transparent aluminum is child's play, but that was only half my plan. I also electrified the outer walls, not only to provide additional security, but also to generate heat in an effort to divert the oncoming cold. That plan failed. Not only did the transparent walls confuse my animals, but I was unable to generate enough electricity with the generators I had on hand to keep all sections of the wall powered. Worse, I realized that since my generators required me to provide gasoline to run, my own mortality was an additional weak link in the plan. If anything happened to me and those generators ran out of fuel, the area would freeze over within hours. Things looked pretty grim, and I'll admit for the first time in recorded history I was on the verge of giving up. But as you know, I haven't always been a resident of the ARK. I am by nature a traveler, exploring a myriad of virtual worlds, other places, other times, and I've been doing so for a very, very long time. Sometimes it was my idea. Sometimes not so much. Let's just say I've had an interesting past. And when you've been kicking around the various realities as long as I have, you tend to forget a few things here and there. The fall of the Fountain Alliance, most of the 70s, what Tony Stark looked like before Robert Downey Jr. Little things, usually unimportant things, but sometimes when the need is great, those long-forgotten memories come bubbling up to the surface. And so it came to pass one night after a fine dinner of opposable monkey thumbs sautéed with a rare mushroom sauce, a flashback to a happier, simpler time. World War II. Ah, yes. I was in Hawaii, paying a visit to the naval base at Pearl. It was December of 1941. I was a younger man then, learning to fly PBYs, prior to qualifying for fighter aircraft, of course. Although my main duty at the time was assisting with the Navy's ongoing research into oceanic thermal layers and their effects on sonar. You may be wondering what this has to do with developing the technology necessary to save my sanctuary, but bear with me, this trip down memory lane is relevant. Now where was I? Oh yes, Hawaii, crossroads of the Pacific. As I remember, the local population was always friendly to the countless servicemen that filled the streets, and although I didn't get to spend much time there, I took in as many of the local sights as I could. To that end, I went so far as to hire a local lad by the name of Goku to act as my guide. If memory serves, he was particularly insistent that I see the statue of King Kamehameha. Normally, I'm not that interested in historical figures unless, as so often happens, I meet them personally. But the little fellow was insistent. He finally got around to showing me the parts of town that were more of interest to me, though, and eventually introduced me to a very friendly young lady by the name of Bulma. Her hair was so dark it was almost blue. We hit it off right away. Young Goku must have felt that he had left me in good hands as he departed without a word. I guess he just wasn't the type to be interested in saying goodbyes. Well, it turned out that Bulma was something of a scientist, studying geothermal activity there in the islands. Eventually, she nervously asked me for help in preparing her notes for a very important meeting scheduled for the following morning, a meeting to gain funding to further her research. Of course, I agreed to help and spent the rest of the evening going over her briefs. I learned a great deal about geothermal activity, I can assure you. The effort must have paid off, as that meeting eventually led to the creation of the Puna Geothermal Research Facility decades later. The local police were nice enough to escort me back to the base the following morning, just in time to commandeer a PBY and airlift my soon-to-be good friend Chester Nimitz out of harm's way as the first Japanese attack wave was coming in. Fortunately, Chester's a pretty good hand with a 50 cal, which made fighting our way out quite a bit easier. We made it, and the rest, as they say, is history. The next morning, after a great night's sleep, I knew exactly what I must do. First, I had to figure out why the nameless Quetzal would no longer look me in the eye. But then I also realized that I now had the knowledge I needed to save my sanctuary, the key to unlocking a cheap, dependable power source that would continue to provide abundant heat that I needed to keep my sanctuary safe from climactic change long after I was gone. Yes, I'm talking about steam. Steam created by the significant geothermal activity present below this entire section of the ARK. I wasted no time in putting my new plan into action and immediately set to work. Step 1 was basic defense. I knew that peak in the distance would soon be covered in ice, so I made haste to tear down all of the transparent walls and replace them with stout, solid, all-metal walls of my own design. Walls designed to defeat even the ferocious onslaught of an adult Giga, while still retaining a rather decorative and, I think, tastefully stylish motif. Along the most vulnerable areas of Smuggler's Run, following the river downstream, and out along the coastline, the mighty wall took shape. This Herculean task took me the better part of a day, and I don't mind saying that I slept well that night. Step 2 was, in its own way, an even more daunting task. I summoned up every scrap of knowledge, every detail of what I had learned from spell-checking Bulma's briefs on that hot Hawaiian night oh so many decades ago. And the longer I worked, the more those memories came flooding back to me, like the hot smack at the end of a cold, wet fist. Almost before I realized it, I had fashioned my leftover transparent aluminum into a new shape, a new form. Instead of a simple wall, it now had a greater purpose, that being to serve as a containment chamber, one designed to harness the superheated steam that I was determined to free from the bowels of the ARK, and mix it with river and seawater in a controlled fashion. I decided to call these new devices Aloha tubes, out of respect for their inspiration and because, well, for them to achieve the desired result, I was going to need to place them aloha the place. If all went according to plan, once in position along the river and ocean bottom near the shoreline, these Aloha tubes would pump out a tremendous volume of extremely hot water. With simple thermostats, I could precisely control the temperature of the water already present in those locations, and using the principles of thermal induction and sympathetic magic that I learned at Pearl HQ, I could jumpstart the already present weak warm water current emanating from the river's mouth, strengthen it, and steer it on an intercept course with the new and equally unnatural cold water current now flowing from the Arctic regions in my direction. In theory, this should divert the cold water current out to sea and away from my lands, in effect, stopping the onslaught of winter cold. With the Aloha tubes complete, only one more step remained, and that would prove to be the most challenging part of this zany plan. I needed to find a way to drill down deep to the ARK's crust, to reach the geothermal energy locked within. In the end, steam power was again the key. Fashioning this primitive, steam-driven drilling rig, I was able to slowly but surely pierce down through all but the hardest layers of stone. That final barrier vexed me considerably, and in the end, I had to locate and affix to the drill bit some of the natural diamonds that are so plentiful here on the Ark. Well, plentiful if you know where to look, which, of course, I do. With that final problem solved, it was child's play to convert the Love Boat into a makeshift drilling rig. I spent the next hour and a half drilling holes all the way along the coastline to the river, and a further 45 minutes putting all the Aloha tubes in place. Rarely have I had to work so hard and so long, but this project was near and dear to my heart. I think I even got a blister. Finally, my geothermic Maginot line was complete, and I spent the rest of the day taking measurements of the water temperature, as well as monitoring for any trace of the beginnings of the new warm water current I so desperately hoped for. I'm happy to say that by sunset my instruments began to sing a testament to my success. A strong current had started flowing along the coast, and its temperature matched almost identically the shallow, warm waters flowing from the mouth of the river. Saber-toothed salmon even began following this current from the river and up the coastline, and I knew victory was almost within my grasp. But the question remained, would it be enough? As you may have surmised by now, I have come to the conclusion that there is some alien intelligence behind the sudden changes I have experienced during my time here on the Ark. Rapid climactic shifts, dramatic and sudden reshaping of the terrain, entirely new species of animal life appearing out of nowhere, even massive lag spikes and serious frame rate issues, it all points to a systematic resculpting of this strange world in which I find myself. Evidence of the existence of powerful sentient beings hell-bent on sculpting this world to suit some mysterious master plan. Assuming for the moment that this theory of mine is not just another unforeseen result of my mushroom recipe, will my bending of the natural laws of this unnatural place be enough to thwart the desires of those who apparently seek the destruction of my beloved sanctuary? We shall have to wait and see. But at least I can do that waiting in style aboard the new airborne observation facility that I have just constructed. I think I'll name it Ark Force 1. We are now 4 days past the date that I predicted that the environmental tipping point would be reached. So far, so good. And not just for my area, but also for the areas that by all rights should be firmly in winter's icy grip by now. But is this victory? I am unsure. It's as if nature itself is holding its breath, waiting for this titanic battle of wills to play itself out. I've done all that I can do. All preparations have been made. All that's left now is to wait and watch. I'm afraid this episode will have to end on a somewhat ominous note. It's now 6 days past sub-zero hour, and while the weather hasn't shifted one way or the other in this location, new animal species are appearing from the lands closer to the Arctic zone. They're moving in my direction at a steady pace. Is this a seasonal migration of some sort, or are they fleeing the oncoming storm? To make matters worse, over the last 2 nights I've heard and felt strange rumblings in the earth coming from the south and west, toward the tangled mass of trees and intersecting geometry that makes up the central area of the Ark. I'm too concerned about what may be about to happen in my own beloved lands to scout out the cause of these strange mini-earthquakes, but they are troubling nonetheless. The ancient Greeks used to believe that earthquakes were caused by Poseidon, god of the immense ocean on which all land floated. Perhaps they knew something we don't. The Romans, on the other hand, ascribed earthquakes to the restlessness of giants whom Jupiter buried under high mountains. What if my actions have disturbed those countless restless giants, and provoked them into shrugging off the mountains that have imprisoned them for so long? What if even now they are breaking through to the surface? Well, whatever happens, I and my loyal animal companions will face it together. And until we see you again, my friends, good hunting. Thanks for watching. I hope you were entertained. If you liked the video, please remember to subscribe. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you. And I'll see you next time.